Welcome to the Kitsap Publishing Deep Dive podcast with myself, Jack Bennett, and Emily Waters. Join us as we explore books, current events, history, politics, health, and more. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Wow, looks like someone's ready for a serious deep dive into the American legal system and legal education.
You weren't kidding.
I mean, this is a whole stack of readings.
That's right.
You really want to get to the bottom of this stuff.
Absolutely.
From what it's like to be a new lawyer these days to some pretty big questions about what law even is.
Yeah, like what's the point of it all?
Right, exactly.
Love it.
Oh, yeah.
So, well, one thing that jumps out
Okay.
from all these sources you sent
Yeah.
is this picture of a legal system that's kind of lost its way.
Really?
Yeah, it's like it's struggling to stay relevant in a world that's changing so fast.
Like it can't keep up.
That's it. It's caught between
Okay.
these big, lofty ideals of justice
Right.
and the messy realities of like
Yeah.
a super complex globalized society.
Yeah, I can see that.
It makes you wonder how effective it can really be.
And it sounds like law schools aren't exactly helping.
Oh, definitely not.
You even included parts of this book called Dean Langdell is Dead.
Right.
Right.
That title, though.
I know, a little dramatic, right?
Yeah, it's a bit ominous.
Well, the author is using it to signal a shift away from this idea of law as a pure science,
Okay.
which is what Dean Langdell,
Right.
the guy who basically invented the modern American law school,
Okay.
believed in.
Yeah. Interesting.
But the author's saying that's outdated. He's saying the legal system is more about power dynamics and social context than just applying these abstract principles.
Okay. So for this deep dive, we're going to try to figure out
Let's do it.
what are the biggest challenges facing the American legal system right now?
Big question.
Is legal education actually preparing new lawyers for this changing world?
Another good one.
And what does it all mean for anyone trying to navigate this system?
Like for people listening, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think one of the key challenges that your sources highlight
Is this growing gap between the legal profession
Okay.
and what regular people actually need.
So, like, being able to afford a lawyer?
That's part of it, yeah.
Okay.
But it's bigger than that. The Dean Langdell author, he actually argues
Yeah.
that the whole legal system is basically designed to help the people at the top. He even compares it to like a cancerous tumor that's messing up how other parts of society work.
Wow, that's a pretty intense comparison.
It is, right. But he's making a point.
Yeah. Okay, so...
And he sees this as a problem
Okay.
with both how lawyers are trained
Yeah.
and how legal services are set up.
Interesting.
He thinks it creates a system
Yeah.
where many young lawyers are stuck with a ton of debt.
I've heard about that.
And they're facing a really tough job market.
Yeah.
It's not a good situation.
That definitely fits with some of the articles you sent
Oh, yeah.
about the student loan crisis
Right.
and all the struggles that new lawyers are facing.
Yeah, it's a real problem.
There's even one article that talks about this idea of jiffy law.
Jiffy law, huh?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
legal services being reduced to something quick and cheap, like fast food.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's like...
It's less about finding the best solution and more about just getting it done
This house.
fast and cheap.
Yeah. And the Dean Langdell author,
Okay.
he argues that this whole trend is really eroding the image of the lawyer as, you know, a wise counselor, a champion of justice.
Like that classic image of a lawyer,
That's
it's
right.
fading away.
It's becoming more transactional, less about the human side. And he thinks that has consequences.
Like what?
Well, he argues that if this keeps going, we risk losing those core values that the whole idea of the rule of law is based on.
Okay, so we've got this big problem of
That's
a legal
this one.
system that seems out of touch and legal education that might not be preparing new lawyers for how the world is changing.
Right.
But where does globalization fit into all of this?
Globalization.
A lot of the articles you sent talked about outsourcing and competition from overseas.
Globalization is a huge factor. It's changing everything.
So how does it affect law?
Well, the Dean Langdell author, he argues that with global businesses and technology, the need for specialized legal experts is growing.
Makes sense.
He actually thinks that traditional law firms might be replaced by smaller, more specialized firms.
Interesting.
He thinks they'd be better at competing globally.
But wouldn't that just make the legal world even more fragmented?
That's a good point. The author does acknowledge that risk.
Okay.
He worries that we might lose
that
wisdom and broad knowledge that came with the old school generalist approach.
So it's this balance between adapting to a globalized world and not losing something valuable in the process.
And that same tension is playing out in legal education, too.
So how do law schools need to change?
Well, the author thinks they need to update their courses to prepare students for this globalized future.
Okay.
He suggests adding more classes on international law, comparing legal systems.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Even things like business and technology.
So less focus on just American law.
Yeah, more of a global perspective.
Okay. You also included this concept of legal process outsourcing, which sounds like sending legal work overseas.
That's exactly what it is.
And is that a growing trend?
It is, and it's putting pressure on American lawyers to,
to be more competitive.
Exactly. More competitive, more efficient.
Makes sense.
Especially in areas like document review and legal research tasks that can be done from anywhere.
What about technology's role in all of this?
Oh, that's a big one.
Several of the articles talk about how technology is going to shape the future of law.
It's already happening.
One even mentions machines replacing lawyers altogether.
Yeah, that's a common fear.
Yeah. So is that going to happen?
Well, the author of Dean Langdell, he actually thinks that as technology takes over, more routine legal tasks, lawyers might need to focus more on the human side of things.
What do you mean?
Things like negotiation, advising clients, ethical considerations, stuff like that.
So areas that are harder to automate.
Exactly, at least for now.
So he's not, like, totally doom and gloom.
No, not at all.
About technology.
He sees it as an opportunity for lawyers to redefine what they do.
Okay, interesting.
But he also warns that technology could make existing inequalities even worse.
How so?
Well, he argues that access to technology and knowing how to use it could become a new dividing line, creating a two-tiered legal system where people with resources could afford the best tech-assisted legal services while others get left behind.
That makes sense, and it goes back to that theme of access to justice that we were talking about.
Absolutely. Access to justice is key.
So what's the solution?
Well, the Dean Langdell author, he makes this really thought-provoking point.
Okay.
He says that the legal system
basically
reflects who we are as a society.
I like that.
So if we don't like how the law works, maybe we need to take a look at ourselves.
Like figure out what our values really are.
Exactly. He's saying the law isn't this separate abstract thing.
Okay.
It's woven into our social, economic, and political systems.
So it's not just about the law itself.
Right.
It's about everything else.
Exactly. It's about how we function as a society.
Wow. So this isn't just a deep dive into the legal system.
Nope.
It's a deep dive into us.
You got it.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack already.
It is.
Before we get into the author's solutions, let's look at some examples he uses to show these challenges in action.
Sounds good.
He talks about property law.
Property law.
Yeah, and this idea of exclusion.
Okay, interesting.
He talks about how the idea of property isn't just about owning a thing, but it's more about rights.
Rights, okay.
Like the right to use something and the right to stop others from using it.
I see.
And he says, this idea of exclusion has been used throughout history to justify all sorts of power imbalances and inequality.
Like what?
Like think about slavery.
Oh, wow.
Where human beings were literally treated as property.
Right, right.
Just a pretty extreme example.
It is, but it shows the potential for abuse.
And how does he connect this to the legal system today?
Well, he argues that the legal system, with its focus on individual rights and protecting property has often been used to reinforce existing power structures.
And make inequality worse.
Exactly. And he suggests that we might need to rethink some of these fundamental legal concepts.
That's the whole idea of property.
Yeah, if we want to create a more just and equitable society.
That's a pretty radical idea.
It is, but he makes a strong case.
So it's not just about tweaking the system a little.
Yeah.
It's about rethinking the whole foundation.
It's about looking at those basic assumptions and seeing if they're actually serving us.
That's a lot to think about.
It is, but it's important.
I agree. And he also uses the example of abortion law.
Abortion law?
Yeah.
Okay.
To illustrate this tension between individual rights and these broader social concerns.
This is where things can get a little tricky, though.
Oh, how so?
Well, the book definitely takes a stance on abortion, with the author calling himself pro-life.
So we need to be aware of his personal views.
Exactly. But what's interesting is that he tries to look at the debate through this lens of legal reasoning and policy arguments.
So he's not just expressing his opinion.
No, he's trying to analyze it in a structured way.
And what are some of the questions he brings up?
He talks about when does life begin? What are the rights of the mother? How do those compare to the rights of the unborn child?
Those are some pretty big questions.
They are.
And he's arguing that these are deeply philosophical and moral questions that the law maybe isn't equipped to answer definitively.
That's his point.
He's saying the legal system, which is ultimately about resolving conflicts, might not be the right tool for dealing with issues that have such profound moral and ethical dimensions.
And this leads him to another important point.
Which is?
The role of public policy in shaping the law. He's basically saying we need to move beyond these legal technicalities and have more open and honest conversations about the values and goals. We want our legal system to reflect.
So we need to decide as a society what we want from the law.
Exactly. We need to be more intentional and less focused on just the legal details.
That makes sense. He also brings up some really interesting points about the limits of law.
Oh, like what?
Especially when it comes to regulating risk and figuring out who pays for things.
Interesting.
He argues that the law doesn't always get things right.
And he makes this really interesting comparison to cause and effect in physics. You know, we often think we understand cause and effect. Then we run into things like quantum mechanics, where things get a lot more complex and uncertain.
Right.
And he suggests that the law faces a similar problem.
So it's like trying to pinpoint one specific cause when there might be tons of factors involved.
Exactly. He uses the example of mass shootings and the debate over gun control.
Sensitive topic.
It is, but it illustrates his point. He argues that, you know, while it might be tempting to just blame one thing, like mental illness or access to guns, the reality is much more complicated.
And he doesn't have a simple solution.
No. He suggests that the law, with its tendency to oversimplify things, often struggles to deal with these kinds of problems.
Well, that's certainly food for thought.
It is, right.
It kind of highlights this bigger theme we've been talking about.
What's that?
That the law, even with all its authority, might not be the perfect solution to every problem.
That's a humbling thought.
It is. And he even talks about how relying too much on the law can actually create more friction and conflict.
Interesting.
So if the law isn't always the answer, what are the alternatives?
Big question.
And how can we build a legal system that's more responsive to the complexities of the modern world?
That's what we need to figure out.
And how do we as individuals navigate this system?
Especially with all these challenges.
Exactly. Good questions. I'm guessing he has some ideas.
Oh, he definitely does.
And I'm guessing we'll get into those.
We will.
In the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned.
Can't wait. All right, so picking up where we left off. The Dean Langdell is Dead author. He actually lays out some pretty radical solutions.
Radical, huh?
Yeah, he's basically calling for a total makeover.
A makeover? Of what?
Of legal education.
Oh, wow.
And the whole structure of the legal profession.
Okay, so like from the ground up.
Pretty much.
All right, let's hear it.
Well, she spends a big chunk of the book talking about reforming legal education. What exactly does he have in mind?
Yeah. What does he think needs to change?
Well, first off, he suggests that we need way fewer law school graduates.
Fewer, really?
He thinks the current glut of lawyers is driving down salaries.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Creating crazy competition and just feeding the student debt crisis.
So what, fewer law schools?
Not necessarily. He's more focused on raising the bar for getting into law school in the first place.
So tougher admissions standards.
Yeah, and making the curriculum more rigorous and relevant.
Okay, relevant to what?
To what it's actually like to practice law.
Right, the real world.
Exactly.
He keeps mentioning teaching real-world skills.
Yes. He thinks law schools are too stuck on analyzing case law and need to incorporate more practical skills training.
Like what kind of skills?
He suggests adding courses on negotiation.
Okay.
How to communicate with clients.
Yeah.
Legal writing. Even business and tech skills.
So less about memorizing legal doctrines.
Exactly.
And more about prepping students for what lawyers actually do.
Right, the day-to-day work of being a lawyer.
He also talks about mixing in more interdisciplinary studies.
Oh, yeah, he wants law students to be able to take courses in other departments.
Like what?
Economics, sociology, psychology, even philosophy.
Wow, so they get a broader perspective.
Yeah, a more well-rounded education.
So they're not just legal technicians.
Exactly. He wants them to be problem solvers, critical thinkers, ethical actors.
Okay.
Who really understand how the world works.
Wow, that's a pretty ambitious vision.
Yes, right.
What about the legal profession itself?
Ah, yes, the bigger picture.
Does he have any suggestions for tackling those structural problems?
Oh, yeah.
Like the big law firms, the billable hours, the lack of affordable legal services?
He's got a lot to say about that.
Okay, let's hear it.
So he suggests putting limits.
Limits on what?
On the size and profits of big law firms.
Wow, that's a big one.
It is, but he argues that the current model, where a few partners at the top make a fortune, while associates are overworked and underpaid.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Is just not ethical or sustainable.
Okay, so limits on profits.
He even talks about limiting billable hours.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
That seems almost unheard of in the legal world.
I know, right?
But how would that work?
Well, he argues that this constant pressure to bill hours encourages inefficiency.
Makes sense.
Leads to unnecessary work and contributes to the burnout.
Right.
That's so common in the profession.
So is he saying lawyers should work like 40 hours a week?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
But he thinks we need to make the profession more humane, more sustainable, more focused on quality over quantity.
Interesting.
He also proposes this idea of allowing for more temporary project-based legal teams.
Temporary teams.
Yeah, like letting lawyers form teams to work on specific cases or projects, then disband when the work's done.
Oh, interesting.
He thinks this would create more flexibility, allow lawyers to specialize. Encourage collaboration, all while reducing overhead and potentially lowering costs for clients.
So it's like a gig economy for lawyers.
Yeah, like freelancing.
But with legal teams.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
So what about affordable legal services?
He's a big advocate for expanding access.
Okay.
He suggests setting up more publicly funded legal clinics staffed by recent grads.
So new lawyers could get experience?
Yeah.
And people who can't afford a lawyer? Could get help.
Makes sense. It's a win-win.
Exactly. Yeah. And it helps address that imbalance in the system.
Okay, what about technology?
Oh, he has thoughts on that too.
I bet.
He thinks that instead of fearing automation, lawyers should embrace it.
As a tool?
Yeah, as a tool for efficiency and innovation.
Interesting.
He even suggests developing new legal technologies.
Oh, wow. Like what?
Technologies that make legal services more accessible and affordable.
So you're saying he envisions a world
where you could get basic legal advice online?
Something like that.
Or through an app?
Potentially.
That's pretty futuristic.
He thinks it's the future of access to justice.
Interesting.
He also has some strong opinions.
Okay, about what?
About the government's role.
In what?
In regulating the legal profession.
Oh.
He's especially critical of bar associations.
Really?
He thinks they've become too focused on protecting the interests of established lawyers.
So they're not serving the public.
That's his argument.
And they're not encouraging innovation.
Exactly. Yeah. He thinks they're stifling competition on new ways of doing things.
So he sees them as part of the problem.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so we've got this radical vision for reforming legal education.
Right.
Shaking up the legal profession.
It's a big overhaul.
It is.
But he doesn't stop there.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah. He also gets into some pretty deep philosophical territory. Talking about the nature of law itself.
Okay.
And its role in a world
Yeah.
that's constantly changing.
All right. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, he challenges this traditional view of law as a neutral, objective system.
Okay.
He argues that it's always embedded in power relations and social context.
It's like how he used property law to show how the idea of ownership is often tied to power and exclusion.
Exactly. He's saying the law is never truly neutral.
Okay.
It always reflects the values and interests of the people who create it.
So it's not some abstract, perfect system. It's a human creation.
And that means it's flawed.
And subject to biases.
Exactly.
He sees this as a challenge, but also an opportunity.
Yeah, a challenge because it means the law can be used to perpetuate injustice.
Right.
But an opportunity because it means we can use the law to create a more just and equitable world.
So we can shape it for good.
That's the hope.
Okay, so big challenge, big opportunity.
And he connects this to this bigger question of what role law should play in a rapidly changing globalized society.
He's saying the old ways of thinking about law just aren't cutting it anymore.
Exactly. He argues that the legal system needs to adapt, become more flexible and responsive.
Responsive to what?
To the complexities of the modern world.
So things like technology and globalization.
All of that, yeah.
Okay.
He even suggests that the very concept of national sovereignty.
National sovereignty? What does that have to do with it?
Well, he's saying that it's becoming outdated.
Outdated? How so?
He points to the rise of multinational corporations, international organizations, global networks. And he argues that these are challenging the traditional power of nation states.
Interesting.
Forcing us to rethink the boundaries of legal jurisdiction.
So it's like the old maps are useless now.
Exactly.
The lines are blurring.
And he's saying law needs to find new ways to navigate this.
Okay, I see his point.
It's uncharted territory.
It is. And this all ties back to the idea of law as a process, not just a fixed set of rules.
Right. And he emphasizes
that
this process is constantly evolving.
So it's never really finished.
Exactly. It's always being shaped by new challenges and perspectives. He seems to be saying that we can't just sit back and accept the law as it is.
We need to be active participants.
Exactly. We need to participate in shaping it to reflect our values.
So we're not just subject to the law. We can help create it.
Exactly. That's the key.
He even proposes some pretty far-reaching solutions.
He does.
On a global scale.
Like what?
Like establishing international tribunals with real power.
Real power to do what?
To actually enforce their decisions. To deal with issues like climate change, human rights violations, economic inequality.
So going beyond individual countries.
Exactly. Creating a more just and sustainable global order.
It's a big vision.
It is, but he admits it's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, it would be.
But he argues it's essential.
Essential for what?
If we want to create a future where the rule of law actually serves humanity.
That's the goal, right?
That's the goal. Okay, well...
But he also offers some more specific advice.
Okay, on what?
On how individuals can navigate the current legal system.
Even with all its flaws.
Exactly. Even with all the challenges.
So what's his advice?
Well, he stresses the importance of finding lawyers who share your values. And are committed to working with you as partners, not just as legal technicians.
So not just someone who knows the law,
right,
but someone who understands your goals.
Exactly. Someone you can trust.
He wants clients to be active participants.
Yes. He argues that the more informed and engaged you are, the better you'll be able to navigate the system and advocate for your own interests.
So knowledge is power.
In a way.
He also talks about using alternative dispute resolution methods.
Oh, yeah, like mediation and arbitration.
Yeah.
He sees those as valuable tools.
Okay, for what?
For resolving conflicts in a more collaborative way.
So not always going to court.
Exactly. Sometimes there are better options.
And he thinks these approaches might be better suited for a globalized world.
It's about cooperation and compromise.
It's not always about winning or losing.
That's his point,
It's about finding solutions that work for everyone involved.
And he also emphasizes understanding your rights and responsibilities under the law.
Okay, so basic legal literacy.
Yeah, he's saying that
Yes.
understanding the law is becoming more and more crucial.
Because it affects everything.
Exactly. It's everywhere.
And he thinks the more we understand, the better we can protect ourselves, push for change, make sure the law actually does what it's supposed to do, create a more just and equitable society.
That's the ultimate goal.
Okay, so it's not just about knowing the rules.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how to use them, how to shape them, how to make them work for you.
That's what he's getting at, yeah.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
It's not just criticizing the system.
Oh.
It's outlining a path to a better future.
It's a vision for change.
Well, that's definitely a lot to process.
It is, right.
But it's also really inspiring.
But it gives you hope.
It does, that maybe we can actually make a difference.
That's the point.
I think it's safe to say this deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
Definitely.
Both in terms of the specific problems facing the American legal system.
Yeah.
And those broader philosophical questions about the nature of law itself.
Like, what is law, really?
Exactly, and what should it be?
Big questions.
And remember, this is just one perspective.
Right.
There are lots of other voices and viewpoints out there.
The Dean Langdell author is just one person trying to make sense of it all.
He's definitely given us a lot to chew on.
He has.
And what's striking is how he connects these abstract ideas about law to real-world challenges that people face every day.
Like, how do I find a lawyer I can trust?
Exactly. Or how do I afford legal help?
Those are real concerns.
And how he ties it all back to the idea that the law reflects who we are as a society.
It's a reflection of our values.
And if we want to see a different reflection, we need to change the image we're projecting.
It starts with us.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
And one that I hope everyone listening will take to heart.
Me too.
Okay, so before we wrap up this deep dive, let's move on to the final part, where we'll explore the author's call for a legal revolution.
This should be good.
Stay tuned.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring the American legal system and legal education.
Lots to talk about.
With this book, Dean Langdell is Dead as our guide.
Definitely a thought-provoking book.
It is.
It really makes you question things.
We've covered a lot, from how the legal profession seems out of touch with everyday people.
That disconnect is a big theme.
It is. And how globalization and technology are changing, how law is practiced.
The world's changing fast.
It is. And we even got into some pretty deep philosophical stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Exploring this idea that law isn't some neutral system, but a reflection of power and social context.
It's all connected.
It is. And as you might have guessed, the author...
He doesn't hold back.
He doesn't. He ends the book
by
calling for a legal revolution.
Legal revolution.
Yeah, I know. It sounds kind of dramatic.
A little bit.
But what does he mean by that?
Is he talking about, like, protests in the streets?
Right, overthrowing the government.
He's actually using the term metaphorically.
He's not advocating for violence or anything.
Okay, good to know.
He's talking about a fundamental shift in how we think about law.
So a revolution of ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A total paradigm shift.
Okay, and what would that look like?
Well, he argues that these small incremental changes won't fix the deep-rooted problems.
So we need something more drastic.
He thinks so.
Okay, so what does he propose?
He believes we need to completely overhaul the system.
Wow, completely overhaul.
Yeah, like reimagine what law's role in society should be.
So start from scratch almost.
In a way, yeah.
Okay, so if we're starting from scratch, what are some of the key principles?
Well, one thing he talks a lot about is moving away from this adversarial mentality.
That winner-take-all approach.
Exactly. He thinks that focusing on conflict actually makes it harder to find fair and just solutions.
So what's the alternative?
He wants a more collaborative approach, one that prioritizes solving problems and finding common ground.
So more cooperation, less fighting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Working together to find solutions.
He also talks about restoring this concept of equity.
Equity.
Yeah, what does he mean by that?
He sees equity as the spirit of the law.
Oh, okay.
Not just the letter of the law.
So it's about fairness.
Yes. It's about achieving fairness.
Okay.
Even when the strict rules might lead to an unjust outcome.
So sometimes the rules don't lead to a fair result.
That can happen, yeah.
And equity is a way to correct for that.
Exactly. He uses historical examples to show how equity has been used to smooth out the rough edges of the law and lead to more just outcomes.
I see. So it's a way to balance things out.
Yeah, to make sure the law is serving its purpose.
Which is?
To create a more just society.
Okay. And he also talks about needing a more democratic legal system.
Right, one that's more responsive.
To who?
To the needs of ordinary people.
He's saying that right now it's not.
He argues that, the current system is too often controlled.
By who?
By special interests.
Like corporations.
Yeah. And he thinks that access to justice is increasingly determined by your wealth and power.
So if you don't have money or power, you're out of luck.
He's concerned about that, yeah.
So what's the solution?
He wants reforms that would empower everyday citizens.
You do what?
To have a greater say in shaping the law. And holding legal institutions accountable.
So more citizen participation.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
He thinks people need to be more involved.
And this connects back to his critique of corporations, right?
Yeah, he's especially critical of this idea of corporate personhood.
Corporate personhood.
Yeah, it's this legal doctrine that treats corporations like people, giving them similar rights and protections.
So corporations have the same rights as people.
In many ways, yes.
And he doesn't like that.
He argues that it's given corporations too much power to influence the law in ways that benefit them but hurt the public interest.
So corporations are basically writing the rules.
He's worried about that, yeah.
Okay, and what about technology?
Oh, he sees technology as a potential game changer.
Okay. In what way?
He thinks it could be a powerful tool for making access to justice more democratic.
How so?
It could help people get legal information, services, even representation.
More easily.
More easily, more affordably.
So technology could level the playing field.
That's his hope.
It's interesting that he sees technology as part of the solution.
He's not anti-technology at all.
He just wants to make sure it's used for good.
Exactly. He stresses the importance of making sure technology is used to promote justice and equity.
Not just efficiency and profit.
Those are important, but not at the expense of justice.
Okay. So it's about using technology thoughtfully and ethically.
Yeah, with a clear purpose in mind.
So we've got this big vision for a legal revolution. It sounds very idealistic.
It does.
But is it realistic?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. Can we actually achieve this?
The author acknowledges the challenges.
Okay, like what?
Entrenched interests.
Yeah.
The slow pace of change in institutions. Even just human resistance to new ideas.
Right. People don't always like change.
It's hard to break out of old patterns.
It is. So is he hopeful?
He believes change is possible.
Okay.
Necessary.
Necessary. Why?
He argues that the current system just isn't sustainable morally or practically.
So it's got to change.
He thinks so.
And he has faith that we can do it.
He does. He believes in the power of ideas.
Okay.
Collective action, the human capacity for adaptation and innovation.
So it's a call to action.
It is.
A challenge to think differently.
Yeah.
Imagine a better future.
And work towards making it a reality.
He's not giving us all the answers.
No. He's giving us a direction.
A set of principles.
And a vision.
Well, he's definitely given us a lot to think about.
I know. It's a lot to process.
It is, but it's also really inspiring.
It makes you want to get involved.
It does. And what stands out to you from all of this?
What really strikes me is how the author connects these big abstract ideas about law to real-world challenges.
Like the stuff we've been talking about.
Exactly. Access to justice, the future of the profession.
And he ties it all back to this idea that the law reflects who we are as a society.
With the mirror.
And if we want to see a different reflection, we need to change the image we're projecting.
We need to look inward.
That's a powerful message.
It really is.
And I hope everyone listening will take it to heart.
Me too.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the American legal system and legal education.
It's been a journey.
It has. And until next time, keep thinking deeply.
And stay curious.
Thank you for listening to the Kitsap Publishing Deep Dive Podcast. Emily Waters and I will see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.